Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, May 30th, 2025. Elon Musk, former head of Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, joins President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office on his final day as a government employee, though he says he will stay on as an advisor to the president. President Trump accuses China of violating a trade agreement from a few weeks ago that led to the lowering of high tariffs on both sides while negotiations continued on a longer-term deal. Supreme Court allows the Trump administration to take away temporary legal protections from over 500,000 immigrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, protections that were granted by former President Joe Biden. And former President Biden talks to reporters about his prostate cancer diagnosis after speaking at a Memorial Day service in Delaware about the honor owed to those who served and died for their country, and losing his own son, Beau, a veteran, to brain cancer. Today is the 10th anniversary of his passing. The Russian ambassador to the UN tells the Security Council that any ceasefire with Ukraine must include the West pausing sending weapons to Ukraine. And Bernard Carrick, former New York City police commissioner who rose to national prominence after the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, has died. He served time in prison and wrote a book about it, and we'll hear what he learned from that experience from a C-SPAN 2 appearance in 2015. President Donald Trump and Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla and SpaceX, held a news conference in the White House Oval Office on Musk's last day as a special government employee, which is limited to 130 days within a year. CBS News writes, in his time serving as a senior advisor to the president and leading Doge, Musk roiled Washington through his team's unsparing cuts to the federal workforce, cancellation of billions of dollars in federal grants and contracts, and dismantling of several agencies, even if some of those actions have been blocked by the courts. That was from CBS News. President Trump began with praise for Elon Musk.
Today it's about a man named Elon, and he's one of the greatest business leaders and innovators the world has ever produced. He stepped forward to put his very great talents into the service of our nation, and we appreciate it. And I just want to say that Elon has worked tirelessly helping lead the most sweeping and consequential government reform program in generations. And you know the kinds of things that he's found and his people have found. He's brought a group of very smart people in, and they found things that are pretty unbelievable. I have to say that the numbers that we're talking about are substantial, but they're going to be very much more substantial with time, because many of the things that we're working on right now, we're going to have to remember Elon as we find them, but the numbers could double and triple because many things, we don't want to go out with them until we're sure, but we've found things that are unbelievably stupid and unbelievably bad. With the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon's delivered a colossal change in the old ways of doing business in Washington. Doge has installed geniuses with an engineering mindset and unbelievably talented people and computers. I actually asked Elon one time, what's their primary thing? And they have a lot of primary things, all having to do with being smart. But he said the thing that they're really the best at is working with computers, so that they can't be outsmarted by somebody that's not so honest, that happens to also be good with computers, but not as good as these people. But the mindset in the senior ranks of every federal department, and it's really changed. And with Elon's guidance, they're helping to detect fraud/waste and modernize broken and outdated systems.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office. He also said, we're totally committed to making the Doge cuts permanent. At the end of his remarks, the president gave Elon Musk a key to the White House. It's a golden key in a wooden box with the presidential seal, something that President Trump carried over from his first term. Then Elon Musk spoke about Doge's work.
This is not the end of Doge, but really the beginning. My time as a special government employee necessarily had to end. It was a limited time thing. It's 134 days, I believe, which ends in a few days. So that it comes with a time limit. But the Doge team will only grow stronger over time. The Doge influence will only grow stronger. I'd liken it to sort of Buddhism. It's like a way of life. So it is permeating throughout the government. And I'm confident that over time we'll see $1 trillion of savings and a reduction in $1 trillion of waste and fraud reduction. The calculations of the Doge team thus far, in terms of an FY25 to FY26 delta, are over 160 billion, and that's climbing. We expect that number will probably go over 200 billion soon. So I think the Doge team is doing an incredible job. They're going to continue doing an incredible job, and I'll continue to be visiting here and be a friend and advisor to the president. And I look forward to times being back in this amazing room. By the way, isn't this incredible? Look at this incredible. It's stunning. I think the way that the Oval Office, how the president has just completely redone the Oval Office is beautiful. I love the gold on the ceiling.
Thank you. It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
That's been there a long time. That was plaster. Nobody ever really saw it. They didn't know the eagle was up there, and we highlighted. It's essentially it's a landmark, a great landmark, and that's 24 karat gold, and everybody loved it. And now they all see it when they come in. So it's been good.
The Oval Office finally has the majesty that it deserves, thanks to the president. So I look forward to continuing to be a friend and advisor to the president, continuing to support the Doge team, and we are relentlessly pursuing $8 trillion in waste and fraud reductions, which will benefit the American taxpayer. That's it, really. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Great job. Thank you.
Elon Musk with President Trump in the White House Oval Office. Story from NPR. Before joining the second Trump administration, Musk had a lofty goal of slashing $2 trillion from the federal budget. Earlier this year, Musk famously took the stage at the Conservative Political Action Conference wielding a chainsaw to illustrate his push to cut spending. But his target number was revised downward multiple times, eventually landing at around $150 billion he claimed would be saved by the end of the fiscal year in September. That was from NPR. Elon Musk took a few reporters' questions.
You had mentioned earlier in the week that Doge had become a whipping boy, and as the president mentioned, you went through a lot to go through this process.
Yes.
Was it worth it for you, and what would you change?
Yes, so what we found was happening was that if there were any cuts anywhere, then people would assume that was done by Doge. And so we became like essentially the Doge boogeyman, where if any cut anywhere would be ascribed to Doge. A friend of mine's daughter, who's at law school at Georgetown, thought that Doge had cut the Senate, internships, the legal internships for the Senate, and we have nothing to do with that. So if they have been cut, it's not to do with us, just as an example. So, it just became a bit ridiculous where any cut anywhere was somehow Doge, including things that made no sense, and we would agree made no sense. There are many things that occur in the government because it's the banal evil of bureaucracy. It's sort of the frankly largely uncaring nature of bureaucracy. It's as the great Milton Friedman said, money is spent most poorly when it is someone else's money being spent on people you don't know, and that's how federal spending is. And then you can't really even blame the individuals because the way the government works is complaint minimization. So. When you do when someone within the government tries to stop money being spent, there's usually someone that complains. And then their manager will say, it's not worth the trouble, just pay it anyway. That happens over and over again.
So was it
I think it was an important thing. I think it was a necessary thing, and I think it will have a good effect in the future.
Elon Musk with President Trump in the White House Oval Office. Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury, Democrat from New York, was interviewed about the legacy of Doge Thursday night on MSNBC.
From the start, it was a farce. And while I think Democrats at large are very much dedicated to making sure that the government is efficient and modernized and that we make changes to how we deliver services, it's very clear that Elon Musk had a dream one day about creating this effort to try to remake the federal government using a tech model and it within the ideological bounds of his ideas about the world and the worldview. And he gave Donald Trump, almost $300 million to fund his campaign. And so, sure, Donald Trump gave him carte blanche to go in there and do it. And it completely failed. He was unable to do anything that even resembled creating efficiency. And as you're pointing out, and as these studies are pointing out, Donald Trump actually increased spending over his first 100 days over the last administration, while they were withholding funding for food aid for children who were starving around the world, while they were cutting back services at Social Security, while they were holding on to vital funding to help our communities do the basic services that our seniors and our children need. So this has been a complete joke. And on his way out, as Elon Musk is headed out, and we don't know what's going to happen to the formal Doge bros who are still there, but I suspect many of them will leave since it's been such an abject failure. He's leaving with having accessed and analyzed the most valuable data sets on planet Earth, and he's set himself up for billions of dollars in new contracts. But the American people don't want this. This is not what they voted for. Even Republicans overwhelmingly reject what Doge is doing. And it's very clear that the Republicans don't have a plan, except for the nefarious plans that they're going to try to put into place through Donald Trump's budget. So Doge is now pivoting to Donald Trump's budget, which we saw delivered to Congress 2 weeks ago. And we're seeing this unprecedented effort to dismantle Medicaid, food assistance, and environmental programs to give $7 trillion in tax breaks to billionaires permanently.
Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury, Democrat from New Mexico, interviewed on MSNBC Thursday night. One more item about Elon Musk. Axios writes that Musk brushed off a New York Times report about his alleged drug use while joining the Trump campaign in a Friday press conference marking the end of the billionaire's days with the Department of Government Efficiency. The Times on Friday, citing more than a dozen people who knew or worked with him, reported that Musk was allegedly taking so much ketamine on top of other drugs that it was affecting his bladder. Musk in the past had said he was prescribed ketamine for mental health issues. Asked about the report Friday, Musk railed against the New York Times for their lies about the Russiagate hoax and added, "Let's move on." That was from Axios. Des Moines Register, Dateline Parkersburg, Iowa, writes that Senator Joni Ernst fielded angry questions on Medicaid cuts, President Donald Trump's tax cut proposal, and Doge at a town hall on May 30th, at one point telling a member of the crowd concerned about Medicaid cuts that we are all going to die. While portions of the hour-long event proceeded respectfully, and Ernst, a Republican, answered several questions without interruption. At other points, members of the roughly 100-member crowd repeatedly interrupted her answers, booed her, and called her a liar. That was from the Des Moines Register. Here's that moment when she was talking about Medicaid eligibility changes in the budget reconciliation bill.
So when you are arguing about illegals that are receiving Medicaid benefits, 1.4 million, 1.4, they are not eligible. So they will be coming off. So people are not, well, we all are going to die. So for heaven's sakes, folks. Okay, no, but what you don't want to do is listen to me when I say that we are going to focus on those that are most vulnerable. Those that meet the eligibility requirements for Medicaid, we will protect. We will protect them.
Senator Joni Ernst, Republican of Iowa, at a town hall meeting today in Parkersburg. One constituent asked her about standing up to President Trump.
My name is Harrison Cass. I'm a former naval line officer. I'm a retired school superintendent living in Waterloo, Iowa. Thank you for coming here today to speak with us. This is what democracy should be about, is direct face-to-face contact with your constituents, and we appreciate that. These are troubling times in the United States of America. Many Americans, including me, have great concerns about the direction that our president is taking, our federal government is taking right now. We clearly have, and this is already in place, we clearly have a president who is destroying the federal government to serve his own purposes. And I could go into hundreds of things. Well, I don't have time to do that today, but let's just say the main thing that disturbs me is this, and it affects all of the other things we've talked about so far. The destruction of the checks and balances that the president has already put in place. He's fired inspector generals. He's fired the leaders, any leader of the federal government that disagrees with him on any political notion. He has fired, and he's even pursuing lawsuits against those who lawfully acted and challenged him in the past when he was trying to overthrow the government. Now he has taken over the government, and he's been very clear about it. He's been good about it. In 4 months, he's made it into a dictatorship. And the worst thing that I think he's done is this. Obviously, the changes, I used to teach political science and history when I first became a teacher after leaving the U.S. Navy. And what I taught about was the 3 branches of government, the checks and balances and balance of power, to our kids in southern Iowa in the high school where I taught. Those are all gone now. And the worst thing is the Senate and the House of Representatives have been rendered useless. And you folks have let it happen. You've sat back and done nothing. The House is the best example. We're still seeing on the Senate, looks like there's a little gumption to fight back against the new dictator. But this has been like a Nazi blitzkrieg, and you folks have sat and done nothing. Now, I know that you were going to go against Pete Hegseth, who is an incompetent fool running the Department of Defense. But you got scared. So my question is this. Are you afraid of Trump? Are you corrupt like Trump? Or are you just at the point you don't care anymore and that's why you don't do anything?
No. No, first, thank you for your service. I do appreciate that. Obviously, I don't agree because I don't think our country is being destroyed. On the other hand, I see that our country is being with the federal government, and because I've worked on these squeal issues for so long, I'm not squealing, ma'am. It's the Doge efforts we're going through. Why was our federal government, sir, because you taught civics, federal government. Why was the federal government established 2.5 centuries ago? It was established for the common defense of the people, so our military defending our country, number one. It was for a common judiciary to settle disagreements, and it was for those things that the people could not do for themselves. That's why the federal government was established. Did it mean planting wildflowers along the interstate? No. All of these other programs that the federal government has been expanded to was not the role of the federal government. The things that were not spelled out, the things that were not spelled out into the Constitution were delegated under the 10th Amendment to the states. So what we are seeing in federal government is the right sizing of the federal government and allowing the states to take up the role that our forefathers intended. It may be chaos to you, but we do have to get back to a semblance of what our country was founded for.
Senator Sen Ernst, Republican of Iowa, holding a town hall meeting today in Parkersburg, Iowa, during this congressional recess week. President Trump is taking issue with the estimate from the Congressional Budget Office that the budget reconciliation bill, the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill that passed the House, would add $2.3 to $3.1 trillion to the national debt over 10 years. President writing on Truth Social, the Democrat-inspired and controlled, in quotes, Congressional Budget Office purposely gave us an extremely low level of growth, 1.8% over 10 years. How ridiculous and unpatriotic is that? They did the same thing to us in 2017, and we doubled their numbers. The information they recently released is even more absurd and indefensible. I predict we will do 3, 4, or even 5 times the amount they purposefully allotted to us, 1.8%. And with just minimum expected 3% growth, we will more than offset our tax cuts, which will, in actuality, cost us no money. That was the full post from President Donald Trump. This is Washington Today. Story from ABC News. President Trump on Friday morning accused China of violating a recent trade agreement with the U.S. The sharp criticism appeared to cast doubt over the staying power of the accord, setting up the possibility of a rekindled trade war between the world's 2 largest economies. President posted on Truth Social, China, perhaps not surprisingly to some, has totally violated its agreement with us. So much for being Mr. Nice Guy. Remarks came hours after U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent voiced pessimism about U.S.-China trade talks in an interview with Fox News on Thursday night. The U.S. agreed to cut tariffs on Chinese goods from 145% to 30%, while China committed to reduce tariffs on U.S. products from 125% to 10%. The lower tariffs are set to remain in place for 90 days while the 2 sides negotiate a wider trade deal. That was from ABC News. President Trump was asked about this today.
Are you going to reinstate the tariffs on China? You said that they violated the agreement with the U.S.
Well, they did. They violated a big part of the agreement we made. You know, if you read that whole statement, I was very nice to them. I helped them because they were in trouble with the stoppage of a massive amount of business. But I'm sure that I'll speak to President Xi and hopefully we'll work that out. But yeah, there's a violation of the agreement. Yeah, please.
President Donald Trump taking reporters' questions in the White House Oval Office. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, was asked about the president's tariff and trade policies today at a Reagan National Economic Forum hosted by the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute, held at the Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California.
Tariffs are obviously in the mix right now, but we also know that a number of countries, the game plan here is to get to trade deals. How do you think that shakes out? Do you think this ultimately, maybe looking to the end of this year or the end of this term for this president, that we actually end up in closer alliances with some of our trading partners than we had?
We did a little bit of too much everything everywhere all at once, so it's hard to step back from that and finish. I think the best we can hope for, and we should hope for, and I think I see them doing this, which is to finish, maybe there's 15 important ones, finish them. There'll be agreements in principle. They will not be trade agreements, but agreements in principle, at least give you a framework, to get things done, and hopefully they could do some in July, August, September, October, November. I would engage with China. I just got back from China last week. They're not scared, folks. There's notion they're going to come bow to America. I wouldn't count on that. And when they have a problem, they put 100,000 engineers on it, and they've been preparing for this for years. But we should engage. And when we do these trade agreements, the most important part is not, making TVs or making furniture or T-shirts or sneakers, stuff like that. It should be the stuff that relates to national security. Okay, that's rare earths, medical, pharmaceutical ingredients, penicillin, and it's things which closely relate to national security. Maybe AI, narrowly done. The chips you hear reading about, and then things which I think are very unfair trade, where they might be using merciless behavior to dominate global industries. That is the stuff of war, by the way. If you read all history, that is what started it. And that might be cars, batteries, solar panels, stuff like that. That we should do with their allies. It's not going to do America a great job if we come and hold it off, but we don't stop them, beggaring thy neighbor or beggaring Europe. So we have to be we should be doing some of that with their allies.
What you're getting at is
and our allies need our help, by the way. They know they need to do some of these things, and some of them won't be able to do it without us.
Jamie Dimon, CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, interviewed by Morgan Brennan, host on CNBC at the Reagan National Economic Forum at the Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California, today. On Wall Street, the Dow up 54, NASDAQ down 62, S&P down a fraction. Fox News writes the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation gauge showed that price growth eased slightly in April, trending closer to the central bank's target as economists warn the impact of tariffs could push inflation higher in the coming months. The Commerce Department on Friday reported that the Personal Consumption Expenditures PCE index rose 0.1% on a monthly basis and 2.1% on an annual basis, the slowest growth rate since February 2021. That was from Fox News. From NBC News, the Supreme Court on Friday allowed the Trump administration to revoke temporary legal status granted to more than 500,000 immigrants by the Biden administration. The court granted an emergency application filed by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem that ends the Biden program that gave 532,000 people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela permission to temporarily live and work in the United States. That was from the NBC News article. Stephen Miller, White House Homeland Security Advisor and Deputy Chief of Staff, was asked about this in the White House driveway.
It's the program that was launched by the Biden administration to fly illegal aliens into the country by aircraft. So when you hear about migrant flights, when you hear about illegal aliens being flown into the country, there were other programs too. They had a fly-in program they had a free transportation program for hundreds of thousands of illegals at the border that was run out of DHS and funded by FEMA. They had a separate program for UAC, unaccompanied alien children. But when you think about mostly when people are talking about the migrant flights, they're talking about this program, the fly-ins for these illegal aliens. About 500,000 illegal aliens from those four countries, particularly in the last 2 years of the Biden administration, were flown directly into American cities and towns. So, of course, we revoked those, they called it parole for those individuals, amnesty basically. And now, of course, they're all subject to deportation from the United States. And, of course, self-evidently, of course, they have to be deported. You can't have a situation where the Biden administration can fly in 500,000 illegal aliens in the last 24 months, and we're having a conversation about, oh, maybe they should get to stay for life. They've been here for 24 months. They were flown into our country illegally, and the good news is the airplanes travel in two directions.
Stephen Miller is White House Homeland Security Advisor and Deputy Chief of Staff, talking to reporters in the White House driveway. Story from Fox News. The order stays, for now, a lower court ruling that halted President Trump's plans to terminate TPS, protections for some migrants living in the U.S., which allows individuals to live and work in the U.S. legally if they cannot work safely in their home country due to a disaster, armed conflict, or other extraordinary and temporary conditions. The stay, like many emergency orders handed down by the High Court, was unsigned and did not provide an explanation for the justices' thinking. Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson did lay out their criticisms in a blistering dissent. Jackson said that, in their view, the court plainly botched its assessment and failed to properly weigh the devastating consequences of allowing the government to precipitously upend the lives and livelihoods of nearly 500,000 non-citizens while their legal claims are pending. That was from Fox News. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Democracy. It isn't just an idea. It's a process shaped by leaders elected to the highest offices and entrusted to a select few with guarding its basic principles. It's where debates unfold, decisions are made, and the nation's course is charted. Democracy in real time. This is your government at work. This is C-SPAN, giving you your democracy unfiltered.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Russia is prepared to consider a ceasefire in Ukraine, writes Reuters, to pave the way for a lasting settlement. But during any truce, Moscow wants Western states to stop arming Kyiv and for Ukraine to stop mobilizing troops, Russia's UN ambassador said on Friday. However, Vasily Nebenzia told the UN Security Council that a simple ceasefire was not enough to end Moscow's more than 3-year war in Ukraine. That was from Reuters. Here's part of the Russian ambassador's statement through an interpreter.
I harbor no doubts about the fact that today we will once again hear carbon copy speeches from the Western sponsors of the Zelensky regime, allegations leveled at Russia, statements about Ukraine's right to self-defense using any means, and calls for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. This being portrayed as the only evidence of readiness to achieve peace and a ceasefire for minimum 30 days. or for at least 30 days, a ceasefire. Yet if we take away all this rhetoric, which is being used to confuse the global south, we understand what is behind these initiatives. These initiatives are underpinned by a desire to once again confuse us, to compel us to take an unilateral act of good faith, which will then be used by the Ukrainians to gather their strength and also to pump Kiev full of more weapons. This is not a path to peace. This is an attempt to pause so as to continue the confrontation. Well, don't count on it. You won't get another Minsk. In principle, we're prepared to consider the possibility of establishing a ceasefire, which would then, in future, pave the way for a lasting settlement to the root causes of the conflict. In order to achieve this, however, we need to see the other party taking steps as well. We've voiced our concerns on many occasions. During the ceasefire, we need, at the very least, for the Western states to stop supplying Kiev with weapons, as well as for Ukraine to stop its mobilization. Yet all of your statements indicate that you cannot agree to such a scenario, whereas we cannot agree to a situation which would allow the Kiev regime to lick their wounds and to stop the collapse of its Eastern Front. If we're seriously talking about peace, we need to discuss the parameters of peace, the conditions of peace, and after that actually discuss the ceasefire and agree to it. This is what the direct Russo-Ukrainian negotiations process in Istanbul is trying to achieve. This is the litmus test for a real, not simply in words. This is the real aspiration for peace.
Through an interpreter, the Russian ambassador to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia, at today's UN Security Council meeting. As a Washington Post article, the next round of direct talks between Russia and Ukraine have been thrown into doubt after Moscow refused to produce its promised terms for peace before the sides meet Monday in Istanbul. Ukraine, as a result, has declined to commit to the meeting date set by Russia for the U.S.-backed talks, while the Kremlin has insisted that its terms must remain secret until talks begin. That was from the Washington Post. President Donald Trump was asked about the latest in the war between Russia and Ukraine during an Oval Office press conference.
I know that you try to stay pretty neutral because not your war, but
And by the way, not my war. I just want to solve the problem for people. This was not a war that was going to happen if I were president.
Right, and so not your war, but as you try to fix it, and as you survey this hellscape of the Ukrainian front lines.
It's horrible.
And you and your team deal with a very stubborn Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
Do you
and
Zelensky. Yeah. But do you look at this
very
conflict
Zelensky too.
any differently now? Like, do you look at this and see Putin as the good guy or the bad guy?
So I've known him very well, and I went through a lot of things with him because Russia was, the Russia hoax turned out to be a total hoax. New York Times, they got a Pulitzer Prize. They have to give back the Pulitzer Prize. That's my lawsuit, and they're doing very poorly in that lawsuit. But they wrote stories about how it was true and it was false, and a lot of Washington Post also. I have gotten to see things that I was very surprised at. Rockets being shot into cities like Kiev during a negotiation that I felt was maybe very close to ending. We were going to solve a problem, and then all of a sudden rockets got shot into a couple of cities and people died. I saw things that I was surprised at, and I don't like being surprised. So I'm very disappointed in that way. With that being said, I'd like to see it end. 5,000 people, I think the number's even more than that, but 5,000 people a week are being killed. Mostly soldiers, but also people that live in little cities and towns throughout Ukraine. And I'd like to see that stop.
President Donald Trump taking reporters' questions in the White House Oval Office. Questions you heard there were from Fox News' Peter Doocy. Associated Press writes, French President Emmanuel Macron warned the U.S. and a large audience of Indo-Pacific nations on Friday night that they risk a dangerous double standard as they concentrate on a potential conflict with China if that shift comes at the cost of abandoning Ukraine. Macron made the remarks as the U.S. is considering withdrawing troops from Europe to shift them to the Indo-Pacific. He warned that abandoning Ukraine would eventually erode U.S. credibility in deterring any potential conflict with China over Taiwan. That was from Associated Press. President Macron gave the keynote address at the Shangri-La Dialogue, an Asian Security Forum held this year in Singapore. He also spoke about how France is navigating the world with superpowers, U.S. and China.
I do believe that the main risk today is a risk of division of the world and a division between the two superpowers. And the instruction given to all the others, you have to choose a side. If we do so, we will kill the global order, and we will destroy, methodically, all the institutions we created after the Second World War in order to preserve peace and to have cooperation on health, on climate, on human rights, and so on. But we need them, probably much more than before. This is why I believe our key challenge is how to preserve peace and stability and prosperity in this current environment. And in a moment when the competition between China and the United States for global leadership could create constraints and a side effect for each of us, without us willing or even able to imagine handing our interests over to one or the other, how to react. And I will be clear. France is a friend and an ally of the United States, and is a friend, and we do cooperate, even if sometimes we disagree and compete with China. I do intend to remain so, loyally, with a demanding approach of our own interests. But France is no less attached to what is essential for herself: strategic autonomy, freedom of sovereignty. And we do defend this approach for Europe and for Indo-Pacific, which means we want to cooperate, but we don't want to depend. We want to cooperate, but we don't want to be instructed on a daily basis what is allowed, what is not allowed, and how our life will change because of the decision of a single person.
French President Emmanuel Macron speaking to the Shangri-La Dialogue Security Forum in Singapore. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is there and has been meeting with his counterparts from Asian nations. During a meeting with the Philippine Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro, they were asked about China not sending its defense minister.
Mr. Secretary, what are your response to China?
Thank you, Press.
Minister's absence?
Let's go. Thank you, Press.
We can't account for whether China engages or not. All we know is that we're here, and we will be here, and we seek to further and establish peace through partnership with allies and partners in the region, but it also requires power and strength, which uniquely America can bring in pursuit of deterrence of conflict. We don't seek conflict with anybody, and that's important to emphasize. We're here to engage military to military, country to country. We can't account for whether or not China's here or not, but we're glad we are, and we think it makes the region more stable and more peaceful.
I'm glad you could ask us that question, but it's hard for their citizens to ask their government why they're not here. And that's the value at which we both stand here for, the ability to ask questions, to lead a free life, to have freedom of the press and other freedoms that we enjoy.
No doubt, no doubt. Thank you.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and the Philippine Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro at the Shangri-La Dialogue Security Forum in Singapore. Reuters writes the U.S. plans to ramp up weapons sales to Taipei to a level exceeding President Donald Trump's first term as part of an effort to deter China as it intensifies military pressure on the Democratic Island, according to two U.S. officials. If U.S. arms sales to Taiwan do accelerate, it would ease worries about the extent of Trump's commitment to the island. It would also add new friction to the tense U.S.-China relationship. That was from Reuters. This is Washington Today. Former President Joe Biden spoke at a Memorial Day service at Veterans Memorial Park in Newcastle, Delaware, his first public appearance since he revealed 2 weeks ago that he was diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. The former president said Memorial Day is deeply personal for the Biden family. Today is the 10th anniversary of his son, Beau Biden, dying from brain cancer.
I know for many of you, Memorial Day, like for us, is deeply personal. For the Bidens, this day is the 10th anniversary of the loss of my son, Beau, who spent a year in Iraq. And to be honest, it's a hard day. His son and I, Hunter, who's here in the crowd, I don't know where you're sitting, Hunter, but all the way in the back there. His daddy came to this event with me about the same age when he started. He just graduated from high school, heading off to college. And you know, it's being with all of you, but quite frankly, makes things a little bit easier. It really does. So thank you for allowing me to grieve with you. Some of you know, some of you knew my son, Beau. He served in the Delaware National Guard, including a year in Iraq. Remember, I got a phone call. I was in Washington. Dad, what are you doing Friday? I said, what do you need, honey? He said, I want you to pin my bars on. I said, pin your bars on? You have 2 kids, you know? Dad, somebody's got to do this, Dad. Proudest day of his life was putting that uniform on. That's not a joke. That's not hyperbole. That's real. And you know, it's one of the proudest things I ever did, pinning his bars on him. And it means so much to our family at the headquarters of the Delaware National Guard has been renamed after Beau. His legacy lives on. His children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, like those you lost, will be remembered. They'll remember who he was. And just like the legacy of all our fallen heroes lives on, they live on in us. And they live on in the strength and freedom of our nation. That sounds like hyperbole, but it's real. It's literal. So everyone who came here today to grieve with grief in your heart, please know you're not alone. You'll never be alone. And your loved one will never be forgotten, period. My friends, Memorial Day is about something profound. Our politics have become so divided and so bitter. All the years I've been doing this, I never thought we'd get to this point, but we are. Our troops don't wear a uniform that says I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican. It says I'm an American. I'm an American. That's who I am. I'm serious about this. I'm not joking.
Former President Joe Biden at a Memorial Day service at Veterans Memorial Park in Newcastle, Delaware. After the speech, he spoke to reporters about his recent diagnosis of stage 4 prostate cancer and how he's being treated.
President Biden, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. You look good. You look good. Well, the prognosis is good. You know, we're working on everything. It's moving along. I feel good.
Have you decided on your treatment options?
Yeah, we have. They're underway, and all the folks are very optimistic.
And so you've started treatment?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Would you be willing to share what exactly that entails?
It's all a matter of taking a pill, one particular pill. And for the next 6 weeks, and then another one. The expectation is we're going to be able to beat this. It's not in any organ. It's my bones are strong. I haven't penetrated, so I'm feeling good.
So
I feel like everybody expects. I've done it all because I'm loyal. I do it every damn year. The very beginning. Never forget my team.
I feel like everybody didn't know what to expect of you today, and then you get here and you're speaking powerfully. You look good. You're confident. What do you say to all those people? Don't count you out.
Well, I say lots of luck in your senior year.
Mr. President, what has this been like for your family? Obviously, this is also an emotional time. This is the 10-year anniversary of your son, Beau's passing. You received this diagnosis just 2 weeks before that.
Well, we're all optimistic about the diagnosis. Matter of fact, one of the leading surgeons in the world is working with me. And he had diagnosed with the same exact thing 32 years ago. He's alive and well and doing very well. So we're optimistic. We're optimistic.
And there's also been a lot of discussion recently about your mental and physical capabilities while you were in office.
You can see that. I'm mentally incompetent and I can't walk and I could beat the hell out of both of them.
Well, do you want to reply to any of those reports, and also to the fact that there are some Democrats who are now questioning whether you should have run for re-election in the first place?
Why didn't you run against me then? You're going to beat me.
Former President Joe Biden with reporters in Newcastle, Delaware. Senator Eric Schmitt, Republican of Missouri, and Senator John Cornyn, Republican of Texas, announced on Thursday they will be holding a Judiciary Committee hearing on June 18th on what they call former President Biden's cognitive decline while in office and the mainstream media's subsequent cover-up. Senator Schmitt saying in a statement, it's time to expose how a cadre of Biden aides and family members were the de facto commander-in-chief while President Biden was sidelined. I look forward to getting the American people the answers they deserve. Story at the New York Times, Bernard B. Carrick, the New York City police commissioner who was hailed as a hero for overseeing the department's response to the September 11th attacks on the World Trade Center, only to fall from grace after he pleaded guilty to federal corruption and tax crimes, died on Thursday in Manhattan. He was 69. His family said he died in a hospital where he was being treated for heart disease. Reporting from the New York Times. Bernard Carrick was on C-SPAN 2's Book TV in 2015 about his book, From Jailer to Jailed, My Journey from Correction and Police Commissioner to Inmate number 84888-054.
I put a lot of people in prison, bad people that did bad things. And I believe in law and order, and I am no different today of a law and order type person than I was 20 years ago. And I put people in prison that wanted to kill me, that killed men I work with, people I seized tons of cocaine from, millions in drug proceeds. And then I went to prison and I met young black men, 18, 19 years old, 5 grams of cocaine, 2 sugar packs in a Dunkin' Donuts shop, 10 years, 15 years in prison because they were tacked on to some third party, fourth party conspiracy. I met commercial fishermen that caught too many fish or the wrong size fish. I met a guy that sold a whale's tooth on eBay. Young men that enhanced their income in a mortgage application to buy their first home. Federal prison. Thousands upon thousands of people are in federal prison for these offenses. And the one thing I've come to realize, and I think that the general public, I am absolutely confident that the general public doesn't know, is that we are creating a permanent underclass of American citizen in this country, a second-class citizen, by the millions. Because once you become a convicted felon, you are a second-class citizen until the day you die. That conviction never goes away. Your debt to society is never paid, ever. We are supposed to incarcerate and rehabilitate. We are supposed to punish and make people better, pay for their crimes, pay for their mistakes, get them back into society a better person. I promise you, that's not happening.
Bernard Carrick on C-SPAN 2's Book TV in 2015 on his book, From Jailer to Jailed. Bernard Carrick has died at the age of 69. He served 3 years in prison. President Trump pardoned him in 2020. In his public service career, he also served in the U.S.-run Iraqi Provisional Authority and was nominated for Homeland Security Secretary, but not confirmed. He withdrew the nomination after another tax-related revelation. Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani writing on X, I am heartbroken over the loss of my dear friend Bernie Carrick. He was a decorated police officer, corrections commissioner, and New York City police commissioner during the worst terrorist attack on American soil. Bernie oversaw the biggest evacuation of a city during this time. His work in security has benefited many communities. My sympathies to his wife Hala, his son Joe, and his 2 daughters, Celine and Angelina, whom are my goddaughters. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.